And I've got a lot more topics for you today. This one just skipped right by me in my outline. And it's worth, but it didn't skip, it came up yesterday when we were talking about Sanskrit. And that is the principle of show me, don't tell me. Show me, don't tell me. That is to say, that the facts should speak for themselves. I shouldn't have to talk about how outrageous something is, or how touching, or interesting, or mysterious. The facts themselves should tell the story. You shouldn't have to tell. If it's interesting, I'll find out that it's interesting. I don't need you to tell me. If it's outrageous, unjust, or beautiful, then I'll find out, because the facts that you give me will tell me that. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam. Sukadeva Goswami was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked. And he did this just to sanctify the residence. So there could be an essay here about how renounced Sukadeva was, how austere and so on. I don't need that, because the facts speak for themselves. Selected facts. Selected terms. This is from Plutarch, the historian. As he was going to supper, word was brought to him that Darius's mother and wife and 2 unmarried daughters, being taken among the rest of the prisoners, upon the sight of his chariot and bow, were all in mourning and sorrow, imagining him, Darius, to be dead. Darius was the nemesis, the archenemy of Alexander. They were at war for long. After a little pause, he sent Leonatus to them to let them know Darius was not dead, and that they need not fear any harm from Alexander, who made war upon him only for dominion. They should themselves be provided with everything they had been used to receive from Darius. He diminished nothing of their equipage, or of the attentions and respect formerly paid them, and allowed larger pensions for their maintenance than they'd had before. But the noblest and most royal part of their usage was that he treated these illustrious prisoners according to their virtue and character, not suffering them to hear or receive, or so much as to apprehend anything that was unbecoming, so that they seemed rather lodged in some temple or some holy virgin chambers, where they enjoyed their privacy, sacred and uninterrupted, than in the camp of the enemy. Nevertheless, Darius's wife was accounted the most beautiful princess then living, as her husband the tallest and handsomest man of his time. And the daughters were not unworthy of their parents. But Alexander, esteeming it more keenly to govern himself than to conquer his enemies, sought no intimacy with any one of them. So you have the facts telling the story. It doesn't go on and on about how virtuous Alexander was, how noble, how great Alexander the... But it's mainly the facts that tell it, how he conducted himself. So it's show me, don't tell me. The Guru Granth Prabhu, who just won a great victory in our Brooklyn legal case, told me that when he was at Yale Law School, when he submitted his first paper, he got it back all red from the professor, scratching stuff out, with the one-word comment, conclusory. Conclusory is really a word of condemnation in legal circles. Conclusory means that you're writing your conclusions. Here's what you want me to believe, what you want me to accept, how you want me to view the case. Scratch that out. Give me the facts. Because when you line your facts up in an appropriate manner, I'll come to the conclusion. And what's more persuasive? The conclusion I've arrived at myself or the conclusion you gave me? People like to make their own conclusions. They like to be the judge themselves. So if you provide them the appropriate facts in a clear, well-selected fashion, they'll arrive at the same, any reasonable person would arrive at the same conclusion that you've reached. So don't give me this conclusory razzmatazz. Give me the facts in such a way that they lead to the conclusion. That's called show me, don't tell me. Any questions about that? Easily said, and not always easily implemented.
Because I feel most people who are writing something to persuade others have their own agenda. So,
Oh yeah, we all have our own agendas.
yeah.
Anyone who doesn't have its own agenda is, dead.
But sometimes it's just the way that it's up to where it's at.
Our agenda, there's nothing wrong with having your own agenda, but if you want your agenda to be successful, then the advice is, rather than going on and saying, I think it's terrible, I think it's this, I think it's that, this was outrageous, this was foolish, this was stupid, just lay the facts out. And the person said, oh my God. How outrageous, how foolish, how stupid.
Yeah.
The facts are more powerful than the conclusions you draw from them. Or, all right, something of your thoughts are there, but you don't need much when your facts are properly marshaled. So much more can be pulled out from the facts. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Paint me the picture. I'll get it. Anything else about that? Anything else about anything, by the way, so far? Is there anything that loose ends with you? Or are we moving along all right?
Maharaj, we will talk a little bit about the translations, because many people now translating.
You want me to talk about translation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Particularly, I am translating from English to Russian, and sometimes
English to Russian.
Yeah, and I have a difficulty in some, because this is not my language, English, and even Russian is not my language, but I'm very...
You're translating from English to Russian, and you're not a native speaker of each.
But Russian is more familiar for me, because from young age, like 5 years old,
Okay,
I'm forced to learn Russian.
You're comfortable with Russian.
Yeah.
English is strange for you.
Not strange, now
I mean,
it's not strange, after
strange in the
25
sense
years.
of foreign, it's not your native language. So,
But,
and you'd like advice.
yes. And the subject matter is a very subtle. This is something very spiritual. And
Well,
mistake cannot be forgiven.
it's hard to give you advice. I can give advice about translation generally, somewhat, because I don't translate it much. I know a little Spanish, a few words of Hindi and Bengali, smattering of Sanskrit vocabulary, but I'm not fit to translate anything really. So with that caveat, my first observation would be that is this what you should be doing? I would think that translation would be something done by a person who's really proficient in both languages, perhaps native for one and highly skilled in the other. Highly skilled in the other. If I'm working, translating into a language or from a language that I'm not really comfortable with, I'm likely to be in problems because these languages have all sorts of booby traps, as they're called. All sorts of, you don't know what a booby trap is, right? Because you're not a native English speaker. But the native English speakers know what booby traps are. You look it up in the dictionary and you can still get it. But it means hidden problems. And I'll give you an example. I wrote an article that was said in South America. And it was translated into Hindi by a Hindi translator who translated it America Production. Production. Southern America. America Production. Production means Southern, and America means of America. So he had, that's like Texas and Louisiana and Florida. These are the southern states of America. I meant the continent below, South America, not Southern America. So he was a, somewhat educated person. He native Hindi speaker. He knew English, but he didn't really know English. And so his readers got that I was in Southern America. About 3,000 miles from where I actually was. So you are battling uphill there. Now that said, there are people who started out without Joseph Conrad, his native language was Polish or something. He became a celebrated English writer. So skills can be acquired and languages can be learned and one can become proficient in a language. But it's hard.
Yeah.
So my first question, forgive me, would be, why you? Or why me? Why should I be doing this rather than the person who's like grown up in a family where his father was Russian and his mother was English? He grew up speaking both. So that's my first observation. You're in a difficult
But
service.
not everybody doing this subject matter, especially not everybody can translate this subject matter. Some scientific
because it's scientific
field.
subject matter, and you have a scientific background.
Yes.
So
this one.
So that's a good answer. Why me? Well, because you have to know three things: English, Russian, and science. The ideal translator would be a person proficient in all three, but given the lack of such a person, you're the closest thing. Okay, I get that.
And what about the high skills is required for which language? For example, to me, in English or in Russian?
Say that again.
High skills, you said in one of these language, person should be highly skilled. So in which
one should you be more skilled in?
Russian or English?
It's a theoretical question because you are what you are.
No,
You're more skilled in Russian.
Yeah.
You're working with English. So
okay.
What's the difference? Which is better? This is where you are.
Because
I mean, if I tell you the opposite, if I tell you that it's better to be more proficient in English, are you going to go back and be more proficient in English than in Russian?
Yeah, no.
So live with what you've got and make the most of your skills.
With Russian, I have no problem, but problem with
English.
With English.
I would say, get the best, focus as much on your English skills as you can. There are various places where there's English as second language books, there's books of idioms, there's There are schools,
Online schools.
Online,
Even
offline.
from Harvard.
wherever. There's online courses, offline courses, where you can improve your skills. You can hang out a little bit with English speakers. You can watch English devotional movies.
Subtitles.
Yeah. And what about translations from Sanskrit? From Sanskrit into English, from Sanskrit to Russian.
Do you know Sanskrit?
I learned it for 16 years. I started.
If you know Sanskrit,
I cannot say that.
so
I'm
what's your
very high.
question? If tell me what your question is about Sanskrit and Russian.
For example, we did some translations of Jiva Goswami's work, poetry of Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami in Gopi Paranathana Prabhu's school, Sanskrit school. I was there for some time. There's not
Tell me what your question is.
So this is I was very much inclined to
Translate
do this work
Sanskrit.
because I'm very much interested in this. Many
Good.
works of Swami still in Sanskrit or in Old Bengali.
Great.
And nobody translating them, nobody doing this work. So
Good.
I don't want to say that I'm professional, but I want to do something. I'm very much interested in this. So
Wonderful.
I'm doing some endeavor. So I advise, do you advise me?
What are you looking for me? You want blessings or
Blessings, yes. Blessings.
That's what we want.
But we have no such.
Everyone else, give your blessings. Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yesterday we were talking about power position at the end of sentence paragraph. Do we use this to split paragraphs, end the paragraph?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I found this example that I've been thinking of the other day. And so I will share it. This is from a book called Arabia and the House of Saud. It's a history by a not too bad author, quite a good author actually. And he's describing a king, Faisal, I think. He's one of the sons of Ibn Saud, the founder of the country. And he was quite a tough guy. So you can, I pulled this out it's a good piece of writing, but it's particularly worthwhile, I think, for this point of the power of how you end a sentence or a paragraph or a chapter or a book for that matter. And it's also good for show me, don't tell me. Oh, it was King Khalid, not Faisal. King Khalid's reign was marked by several such flare-ups that revealed the monarch to be more than just a figurehead. His insistence that law-breaking foreigners should suffer the same Islamic penalties as Saudis was another piece of policy that was very much his own. In the reign of Faisal, Westerners who were caught brewing or selling alcohol were quietly imprisoned and expelled from the country. In the reign of Khalid, they were caned publicly in the streets. End of paragraph. The seizure of Mecca's Grand Mosque in November 1979 cast the king in yet another light, for the crisis induced real shock inside the kingdom. National sentiment searched for a focus which was located in the king. And when Khalid went to visit the several hundred Saudi soldiers injured in the siege, it was as a representative of the whole country. He gave out jeweled watches, color televisions, cassette radios. He had whole showrooms of cars bought up as presents for the soldiers. You could not find a new Toyota in Jeddah for 2 months after the siege. But as King Khalid moved from bed to bed, looking at the bandages, slings, and plaster, and listening to the doctor's descriptions of the wounds scarring 461 of the kingdom's finest young soldiers, he was obviously finding it difficult to come to terms with the wounds and injury on every side of him. End of paragraph. Saudi newsreels are not noted for the subtlety of their camera work. Perhaps the fault lies in their editing, or the lack of it. So the TV camera focused long and lingeringly upon the face of Khalid ibn Abdul Aziz as he contemplated the total of pain and suffering spread out around him. Suddenly, in the unblinking electronic gaze, tears welled up into his eyes, and then, openly and unashamedly, in the sight of all his people, the king began to cry. He shows rather than tells. When you hear about all that stuff given out, you don't need to have a diatribe or an explanation of what the king was thinking. And all of these examples, the public caning, we don't really need to hear that the king is tough and mean and blah, 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 blah. The examples are all vivid, they all tell, and especially the last example is brilliant. And he stops exactly at the right place. One more sentence and it will be ruined. Clear? Okay. We're going to go back to mechanical editing. We've been talking about some of the more subtle and artistic aspects of editing, or aesthetic, let's say. And now we're going to talk about practical mechanics. I think that was the name of the magazine. To which, or to begin with, we're going to talk about, let's see, this virtual thing. Okay, pronouns. Everyone knows what a pronoun is.
Yes.
Okay. They're proxies. They're stand-ins for words that you use elsewhere. I, me, you, he, she, it, they. They're proxies. And there are rules for handling these proxies, and there are principles, that is, what or who the proxies stand for, which are called antecedents, coming before the words the proxies stand for. Rule 1, there must be a principle in existence for the pronoun or proxy to act for. Who am I a stand-in for? There has to be an entity for which the pronoun stands. The principle should not be very far off. There should not be two parties justifying even a momentary doubt about which the pronoun represents. If you're the ambassador, I shouldn't have to wonder, even for a moment, which of two countries you're the ambassador for. One pronoun should not represent two principles on one occasion. And the pronoun should seldom precede its principle. And now, for examples. There must be a principle. Dr. Barnes expressed his view before executives of the city councils of churches. It was one of a number of meetings. Problem? Dr. Barnes expressed his views before executives of the city councils of churches. It was one of a number of meetings of...
Dr. Barnes is the subject.
Mm-hmm.
It is referring to.
It's not clear.
What is it referring to?
It what?
What is it referring to? The principle of what?
Yeah, it doesn't refer to anything. What is it, does it serve as a proxy for? There's nothing. And you see there's lots of times people are using these pronouns without, and which is fine perhaps in speech, but in edited prose we expect that the antecedent for it will first of all exist. Clear? Anyone not clear on this? The principle should not be far off. The process known as bhakti is revealed in the Vedic texts. On this path, the soul has three guides: the scriptures, the bona fide guru, and the conduct of saintly persons. By following it faithfully, the soul becomes fit to receive the grace of God and return home back to God.
It usually is the process known as bhakti. But
By
it's talking about
following
three
each
guides.
Mm-hmm.
It's talking about three guides, but the issue is referring to the process.
Yeah, the it refers to the process, which was one sentence and about 20 words back. And there is a principle, but it's so far back that I'm lost. Clear? And this might be an extreme example, there could be lesser examples, but the point is clear, the principle shouldn't be very far away. There should not be two parties justifying even a momentary doubt about which the pronoun represents. Srila Prabhupada faithfully presented the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was the ideal teacher of... Now the reader has to try to sort this out because the editor has lapsed in his duty.
And they both were ideal, but it shouldn't represent more than one person.
The writer clearly intends one or the other, but you don't know which one.
Because this
Because they
Clear? There should not be two parties represented by one pronoun. She was one of 10 chicks Mr. and Mrs. Sherry purchased some time ago when they were 6 weeks old.
when they were 6.
Two potential parties that the proxy could represent. The proxy should seldom precede its principle. This is the final point. When he realizes the importance of self-realization and engages in devotional service, dedicating himself without reservation, the yogi becomes perfect. It's grammatical.
It's grammatical.
It works. I can understand it. But until I reach the end of the sentence, I don't know who he is. I'd be so much more comfortable if I could read, this is the final point. When the yogi realizes the importance of self-realization and engages in devotional service, dedicating himself without reservation, he becomes perfect. Otherwise, I'm sort of holding this piece up here. You know, I've got a little room in my mind, and I've got this he, and I put it on a shelf or on the bulletin board, because I know I'm going to need it later, or I'm going to have to, you know, it's like an unresolved issue. It's like the car park, you know, we parked this temporarily, I know I'm going to have to go back to it. So you've given me that much more work to do, that much more overhead to deal with, particularly in scientific writing. Yeah, I'm already dealing with difficult concepts, I'm already dealing with necessarily abstract entities. And now on top of this, you're going to give me problems like, I don't know what the pronoun stands for.
Just 2 hours.
It's a puzzle to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I've got to dedicate a part of my intellect to that while I'm trying to deal with the implications of spin and strange forces and you know, all of that. You want to do all that work so that no one even notices the words going by. It's the thoughts, it's the concepts that I have to deal with as a scientific mind, not, you know, don't make me try to figure out the grammar. Science or anything. Yeah.
Can I just be a little bit more meticulous here and go on? Like, for example, would you say that this is the final point, put that at the end would be more efficient and more?
To which point at the end?
This is the final point, that sentence.
Without a context, I can't say. If they've been talking about the preliminary point, the second step, the third point, the fourth point, then you end with this is the final point, maybe that's powerful. But if you want to call attention, say, this is the final point, as in attention. Then you say, this is the final point. It all depends on what you're intending to do. You want the numbers of your pronouns to match. If it's one, then it's he, she, or it. If it's two, it's they.
There's a movement towards the singular they. There's kind of
there's a singular there. Let's keep that for a moment. We'll get to it. Everyone is generally understood to be singular. Everyone has his, not their problems. Everyone is generally understood to be singular.
Maharaj, jiva. Jiva, when we are referring to the jiva, do we use he or it?
Depends on how you want to do it.
this has to be consistent.
Yeah. Or according to your purpose. Like Maya can also be it, or if you want to personify Maya, it can be she. They match in case. The relevant pronouns, who, whom, he, him, have to match in case. And that's, he and who are for subjects. They do something. Subject is the doer. him and whom are for objects. They have something done to them. I saw him. You wouldn't say I saw he. A pronoun may be an object of a preposition. To, by, for, on, and so on. These are your prepositions. So between you and. Between you and?
Her.
You and her. Yes.
I.
I.
You and me.
Me.
Between you and I.
Me. Me. You and me.
Who's for I? Who's for me? Who's not sure? Okay. In this case, the eyes don't have it. I is the pronoun for what? Subject or object?
Subject.
Subject. And between is your preposition, yeah. So between you and
Her.
her, or in this case, it's either me or I, which one?
Me.
It would be the object, me. We often hear between you and I, but the grammatically correct way to go is me. You wouldn't say, for example, give it to I, because the object of the preposition to would be me. So here the object of the preposition between should also be me.
What about who and whom? I hear this. Whom should be object,
Whom is object.
but many times who is used, even in
Yes.
the place.
Whom, but in fact, whom is gradually being displaced. It's not gone, and but it's dropping out of sight. Not entirely. But if you don't know when who and whom should be used, when to use which, you may seem unlettered. That is to say, ignorant. And it gets complex also. You sometimes have to take clauses apart to figure them out. It can get really dicey. But, and therefore whom is convenient to dispense with whom and just use who for everything. Whom should I say is calling can sound stuffy these days. Who should I say is calling is practically standard, even though whom is called for. It is so much work to figure it out. We have a whole section in the BBT style guide dealing with how to figure out who and whom. And I'd perhaps, rather than try to explain it all, I can do two things. I can go through it with you, or I can just leave it for your own work. Maybe I'll go through it with you because it matters. First thing about who and whom. In BBT style, they're always lowercase except at the end, beginning of a sentence. We don't have divine capitals for who's, for who. Okay, here we are. There's a big section. Who, whom, whoever, and whomever. And it's here in detail because it's sometimes really hard to remember the rules and how they apply. So the basic rules we just went over. Who or whoever for the subject of a verb. They lived in fear of Hiranyakashipu. Who had obtained? They could hardly understand who Krishna was. Whoever engages in devotional service to Krishna is at once liberated. That's easy. Here's the next one that's easy. whom or whomever for the object of a verb or the object of a preposition. Krishna kidnapped Rukmini, whom he plucked from among the assembled kings. Ravana was a demon for whom sense gratification was the goal of life. Krishna is free to give his mercy to whomever he chooses. And the way you deal with these, really, when you have puzzles and you have to unpuzzle them, gives Krishna gives his mercy to who or whomever he chooses. Now, to decide the question, who or whom, I can I can reverse the order, put it back in the normal order it would have. That is to say, he chooses now it becomes clear, because obviously this is going to be the object of the verb, and so it will be whomever. So you just take it from the sort of reverse order in which you find it in the sentence, and say if this stood alone as a sentence, what would the sentence be? And then is it a subject or an object? That helps you unpuzzle such matters. Clear? Yeah?
Maharaj, some of them may seem awkward when we write them. Like usually when we say we speak, it is me. Who was it? It is me. But it actually.
Okay, there's one more rule I didn't tell you. When you have forms of to be, what follows is the subject case.
Yeah. It is I.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Right.
It is I.
Subject or it is matching case. Let's get this right here. Even I'm confused now. That doesn't sound right.
It is I.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right, but like who is it to say it is
Yeah.
I? It's the general.
You'll have the predicate nominative, as it's called,
Yeah.
which means the subject all over again. So, yeah, it, and then is doesn't turn it into the object, it turns it into the predicate nominative. It is I.
It is I.
So that's grammar. It is I, Hamlet the Dane. I, it's called for. But you make sounds stuffy, and it's very common in speech to say, it's me.
It's yeah.
So it's another one of those things where, as English goes along in its informal way, these rules are often set aside without condemnation.
Maybe better just to reword the sentence so that you don't have that.
In some occasions, if it's you might want to reword it, or just be bold and say,
Just be bold and say it is I.
it is I, or just say, I'm going to go with the common usage, it's me.
Yeah.
But if Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita, it is me who is the herb, it is me who is the sacrifice, it is me who is the the mantra and so on. A mantra evajam. It is me. Then an educated reader would look and say, it's you, the editor, you screwed up. Krishna kidnapped Rukmini, whom he plucked from the assembled kings. So, whom he plucked whom. Just straighten it out and it becomes clear. But, whom is often misused for who because of failure to realize that the relative pronoun, who or whom, is the subject of the following verb, not the object of the preceding preposition or verb. The whole relative clause is the object, is gestaisi. And so, in correct usage, they argued about who should be honored with the first worship. Who should be honored with the first worship? Who becomes the subject of the clause that follows? The king decided to give his daughter to whoever could bridle the 7 bulls. Whoever is the subject of the clause that follows. And I'm going to give you all this written down, I think. I actually had to pull this together from several different usage books because I couldn't find all of these points in one place. But then again, the pronoun may serve as the object. Duryodhana was told he could choose whom he wanted to have on his side. Because yes, the clause is there, but in that clause, whom serves as the object. Duryodhana could choose whom. In such puzzles, one can sort out the grammar by restoring the clause to its natural order, as we demonstrated here. Lord Krishna, to give another example, who the king saw was the very best of heroes, had come to rescue them. You sort it out by saying, you followed that? Lord Krishna, who the king saw was the very best of heroes, had come to rescue them. The king saw that he, therefore who, was the very best of heroes. These choices are not usually quick to make when they get this complex. The editor has to pause and look at this and say, okay, how does this go? And of course, once you're experienced, you can get better at it and knock down a lot of them just like that. But they can be dicey. And then it gets really more complex. Fowler advises us against the temptation to regard he, who, as a single word that surely cannot have the question of case settled twice over for it. That is, you have to look at both words separately and determine what grammatical role each plays in the sentence. It's not that he, who is like a fused item. So here are some errors. Should not a Christian community receive with open arms he who comes out into the world with clean hands and a clean heart? They should receive him. And then the subject is who comes out. Who is the subject, but him is the object of receives. they receive him who comes. So him is object, but who is subject. So they receive him who. They came to fight in order to pick up the challenge of he who had said, our future lies in the water. It should be him. Again, it's the challenge of him, but who had said? Don't fret if you haven't digested this all on the spot. This is high-tech editorial stuff.
That's the nice thing I found about the editing is you have all these reference guides, so you can always go back and look.
Yeah, the guides will help you, but sometimes you really have to puzzle.
Yeah.
And so, as a further one, all things come to whoever waits. Because whoever is the subject of the clause, whoever waits. But all things come to him who waits. And I confess to you that on a question like this, I might go looking to the style guide and say, now let's get this right here. And I've given the references where you can look for further help on this. So you start with knowing that who is the subject, whom is the object, he is the subject, him is the object, and so on. Go on from there. Okay? You're aware of the issues of the difficult terrain, of the enemy forces lying in wait to ambush you. And you have the field guide. So, good luck.
Thank you.
Anyway. It almost goes without saying that you should know the difference between such pairs as this one being the possessive, this one being the conjunction, or there, and there,
And the other there.
yeah, the other there too.
So many things.
But you see it in edited prose. You see the mistake made sometimes. One is confused with the other, especially badly edited prose. By definition, anything that confuses these is badly edited prose.
Yeah. It's
Whose and whose is another one. Your and your. Another topic. Well, we're topicking is reflexive pronouns. You know what a reflexive pronoun is? Self, yeah. It's a pronoun that turns back on itself. Myself, yourself, himself, themselves. These are all reflexive pronouns. They're used when the subject and object are the same. You can ask yourself. As a rule, they should not serve as substitutes for the simple object. That is, you can just ask Krishna Das for myself. What do you want there? What do you want there? You can just ask is it us or
Me.
me. All you need there is the simple object. You find it also in subject. So us and myself are going on Sankirtan. What do you want? What do you want? I want high scores. Yeah. Myself on books. No, so Vas and myself are going on Sankirtan.
Vas and I.
Hi. It's a simple subject. There's nothing turning back on itself. I didn't hurt myself or say to myself or ask myself or kill myself. I didn't do anything to myself.
Was this also one of the Indian English usages?
No, Americans do it all the time. We'll stick this on the Indians. Americans, there's a certain importance perhaps that one thinks that we gain by speaking of myself. I'm not quite sure how this happens, but it's not, though common, it's not standard, and the edited text is just damn. Clear?
Yeah.
Good for the Indians to know that the Americans mess it up too, isn't it?
And
It's
the
just hard
British.
for everyone.
And the British.
And the British, oh yes. I'll give you an example. You know, I'd never really been to Britain before I joined ISKCON. And then we started going to India. And we passed through Heathrow along the way. And I saw a sign there as follows. And I you know, was of the bias that the British are the ones who really know how to use it. And the Americans are sort of
No.
yeah, we're the barbarians. Now let's give it bigger. This is the sign I saw at Heathrow. Let's make it a little short, smaller, because I want it to fit the way I originally saw it. That's the sign I saw. It was on 2 lines, but the point didn't fit. No electric passenger carrying vehicles beyond this point.
No vehicles beyond
It's
this?
actually correct.
Yeah.
No electric passenger carrying vehicles beyond this point. Sounds good to me, right?
Passenger carrying.
Electric passengers carrying vehicles. Happens all the time, especially in Britain.
But am I electric?
No electric passenger carrying vehicles beyond this point.
I mean, it's about passenger carrying vehicles, and they're electric.
It's about passengers carrying vehicles. It's like I see in the airports these days, you can't bring skateboards, electric skateboards in your luggage, so maybe it's like that. You can, but here it says that the passenger is
electric.
No electric passenger carrying vehicles, so it can't be about that.
No.
What's going on here?
No.
No electric vehicles carrying passengers beyond this point.
No electric vehicles carrying passengers beyond this point. That's actually what's intended.
No passenger carrying electric vehicles beyond this point.
It was a simple error. All they needed was one small thing. And what is that?
A hyphen.
A hyphen. Comme ça.
passenger carrying, yeah.
No electric passenger carrying
Yeah.
vehicles beyond this point. But for lack of a hyphen, I stood there blinking at and it was there for years, and you know, with all these educated people passing through Terminal 1, whatever it was.
But after these vehicles, there is no comma. Should be not comma after vehicles?
No.
No. In Russian, we will put a comma. In Russian, we will put comma.
Watch out for importing Russian into English. The same rules may not apply. Okay. Shall we talk about gender neutrality?
Please.
Yes.
That's a big
Yes.
deal.
That's a big one.
Gender-neutral pronouns are rather a new breed of creature. When I was growing up, there were no such things. As far as up into the 1960s, we really didn't worry very much about gender neutrality in our language. There is a long history of concern about the matter, but it was largely the province of people with radical views or social reformers or perhaps people with linguistic issues on their minds, but it wasn't a general concern. It's now not only general, there are now, what would you say, almost a totalitarian regime insisting on gender neutrality. If you go to a modern American university, you will be excoriated if you fail to observe principles of gender neutrality in your written language. It's drilled into the contemporary student that failure to use some sort of gender-neutral language is a serious offense and a serious offense, and shows a retrograde mentality in need of correction. It's just super strong. Not only is it drilled, but the world is now full of apologetic academics who want to be ever so careful to make sure that we're inclusive in our language. And so they fall over themselves or bend over not only backwards but 2 or 3 times to impress us with this. Anyway, whether we like it or not, it has become a major concern for writers of the English language. With various proposed and implemented solutions, starting with he/she. If I learn of any of you using he/she, I will deny that you ever attended my course. It's just ungainly. Especially if you have to say it, he/she should do whatever is needed to, it's just awful. And same for him/her. I want to make sure that he/she is aware of his/her responsibility. It's just ungainly, awkward, clumsy is really, now you see how those synonyms and things work. Ungainly, awkward, ungainly, but clumsy really fits. They all mean more or less the same thing. Ungainly, clumsy, awkward, but clumsy is really the word I want. Mark Twain said that the difference between the right word and the almost right word is like the difference between lightning and a lightning lightning bug is, for those, you know what everyone knows what a lightning bug is? Those little bugs that glow, those are lightning bugs. You know, they turn on. We call them in America lightning bugs. So the difference between the right word and almost the right word, lightning and the lightning bug. Using one as a substitute is another possible way to go. One should be careful of one's grammar if one wants to be taken seriously. Perfectly good usage, long established in the English language, absolutely grammatical, 100% gender neutral. It's good. But it's got this formality to it. One should be careful about one's language, but when we get down to more simple and practical things like one should make sure that one's shoes are starts to get stuffy. Especially if you're writing prose that you want to have flow and be informal and talky. One's is just a little bit uppercut. You know, it speaks with a more reserved diction, a more formal tone. So it doesn't always fit. It sometimes fits. One should line one's P's and Q's perfectly good. Certainly a lot better than his or hers P's and Q's. But for informal contexts, it may just be too stiff. So it's a partial solution or a sometimes solution. Now we come to they with a singular antecedent. As we just recited, they is plural pronoun, and since pronouns and their antecedents should match, they should be reserved for plural antecedents. But in the interests of gender neutrality, we start using they because it's gender neutral. It's not strictly grammatical according to the standard rule, but its virtue is that it's gender neutral. And it's also somewhat idiomatic. That is, we often talk in these terms, like, I want every boy and girl to clear their desk before they leave. That's perfectly ungrammatical in terms of the rule of matching, and yet it's entirely idiomatic. Your fourth grade teacher could very easily say, I want every boy and girl to clear their desks before they leave. We talk that way.
We write that way.
And we sometimes write that way. I therefore suspect that they is going to gain a lot more ground as the gender neutral pronoun of choice. It's certainly hasn't taken over as the always best choice or always even acceptable choice, but but it is gaining ground. If you look at dictionaries that have usage panels and they say 40% of our usage panels said accepted this, you'll see that they, with a singular antecedent, is gaining ground. Largely because of this gender neutrality. But you do want to keep in mind that most of your readers have learned the rules, and that in some contexts they may look at your they and say, why are they using a singular, a plural pronoun with a singular subject? Or they may feel, if they don't ask the question, they just may feel for a second, there's something weird about it. So it's a choice. You balance your considerations and go with what appears best to you. He or she Now that's inclusive. You can't get more inclusive. Well, you can. I'm sorry.
That's when you go.
We have enough, things have gone beyond just
He and she.
he and she.
I'm just stating that.
I'm just.
I'm not even going to get into what pronouns we deal with for those contexts. Although some people are indeed mightily concerned with those issues. But sticking with the traditional two genders, he or she is inclusive. He or she should be careful to clean up his or her desk. I want every boy and girl here to clean up his or her desk. And you can do that. It's grammatical. There's nothing wrong with it, except that it can get awfully heavy. All those he or she's start adding words. He or she should be careful to mind his or her manners when he or she goes out, and so on. You can't really live your life that way, speaking in such a fashion. He or she use sparingly may work, or him or her, or his or him or her, or his or hers may sometimes work. Use sparingly, but if you start piling it on, it's going to kill your prose. Then there's this, switching between he and she in alternating sentences, paragraphs, or chapters. I see this often, especially in what they call soft sciences, sociology and so on. You read books published by respectable authors with graduate degrees, published by university presses, who say things like, in the event that your patient presents to you issues concerning self-esteem, you might ask her when she first felt this way, and so on. On the other hand, when a patient comes to you with issues concerning phobias, you might ask him when he first noticed, blah, blah, blah. And yet, in another case, if a patient comes to you complaining of habits that she'd like to break, and you go back and forth between he and she, and him and her. And I don't know about you, but when I start reading that prose after a short while, I feel like a yo-yo. And really, what I get out of people who write that way is, I'm gender neutral, I'm gender neutral.
That's more radical.
It screams from the page.
Yes. I mean, this kind of very modern, I don't know, it's a hype or it will stay like that? All this...
Well, you're asking for a judgment call on gender neutrality and whether this trend, this madness, as some would have it, is likely to stay with us. And at this point, I would say that it seems, I regret to report that it seems so.
So if we express ourselves in old style, if we express ourselves in old style,
then people are going to look at everyone else.
We're going to get lynched.
Now, there are lots and lots of very good authors from days gone by, and we forgive them for their sins. For Prabhupada's writing, we shall not retrofit for gender neutrality. We'll just say, previous century, this is how people spoke and wrote. But for those who are writing today, you can bucket. You can say, I do not believe, as one author whom I like has said, I haven't seen evidence that gender-neutral language has improved the lives of women anywhere, and so I shall stick with the language to which I'm accustomed. But even if you do that, you're like obliged these days to say, I'm not doing it because.
Right.
You have to mount a defense.
Justification.
That's how it goes these days. You can just blithely ignore it and just say, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. But be aware that your audience today, especially your younger audience, is being educated to feel that there's something just a little smelly about prose that's not gender neutral.
For me,
In India, I think this is less so. We haven't quite dragged you into the same swamp you're in. But you'll get it.
for preaching, though, it seems to me that we don't want to create any barriers to entry, into Islam.
Right.
So whatever, if we use he or she, and whatever will make people feel comfortable to come and join the movement, then I don't think it's such a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, this is, what's in it for us as preachers to stick up for what we think is the best English. We're going to go with whatever gets our message across. Yes.
Right.
So there you are. I'm not advocating by any means that you ignore gender neutrality or that you refuse to go along with it. I'm just reporting to you the circumstances with some regret and offering you what the various alternatives are with some cautionary remarks about the various available solutions. I'll tell you what I did in my book, by the way, of which we have multiple copies today. So 3 or 4 for your best friends. And maybe for some of the other students here, actually, now that I think about it. But I apologized in my book by saying, I did something a little sneaky in my book. I have not revised Ecclesiastes for gender neutrality. I'm not speaking about the text itself. Considering modern sensibilities, I respect efforts to make biblical language more inclusive, more linguistically universal, but Ecclesiastes is not a gender-neutral text. And I elaborate on that the author is male and he speaks male. He sees men as primary, women as secondary. He's speaking to men, and so on and so on. And then I say after that, I'm not prepared to retrofit into modern attitudes. So that's Kohelet, that's Ecclesiastes. When paraphrasing Kohelet, also, for the most part, I leave the gender of his language intact. And since I paraphrase him all over the place, that gives me a lot more heat than I realized. So it's sort of a sneaky maneuver, but it's not always available. But I think it works in my case, yes.
There is also, I mean, I don't want to get into the politics too much, but I mean, you're saying that this Ecclesiastes is written by men for male people. But sometimes you can also say, like, well, in that context, that, like, talk about mankind, or in guys, you can say humanity is now more.
I don't really want to argue the question of whether the gender neutralists have a case.
No.
They do, and I have a little sympathy for it. There are cases where you really would say that it's obtuse or offensive or at least inconsiderate to just assume that this is a myth, that we're talking to males here or about males here or only about women here. And you get into stereotypes and you get into all sorts of issues for which gender neutrality has come to the top. So I'm not going to argue that case here, for or against.
No, I don't either, but I mean, I just want to point out that for the definition of such words as he in certain terms could be defined as including both men and women.
Yeah, and that's the traditional use of he.
Yeah.
He has always been understood to be a gender neutral neutral pronoun. It's the standard gender neutral pronoun in English. Everyone should mind his own business. That means you. You know, it means all the people sitting on the left side of the room, not just the ones on the right side of the room. But that's oppressive because we're assuming that the pronoun that goes for males goes for everyone. That's the perception that it's not really gender neutral, rather it's male oppressive. So again, I don't want, you can pick up books about this. There are books explicitly written about gender neutrality and even campaigning for it before the campaign succeeded. You know, what the reasons are. There are guidebooks that were really devised to push the agenda forward by coming up with suggestions as alternatives. Flight attendants instead of stewardess is a good example. Firefighter instead of fireman, and so on. So that, you know, a lot of work has been done in this field, and there's more work to be done, sisters. But anyway, it's part of what we live with, and what you may even feel in your own heart is something that you want to be sensitive about, because people do have you know, feelings about these things. Okay, so I'm just going to try to help you do it better. If you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, I will turn a blind eye. I will not disown you for just refusing to go along with gender neutrality. But if you do it badly, then I never met you. Reconstructing a sentence to make it plural is often a useful way to avoid gender-specific he or she. You go to plural because then they is the native pronoun. So you can just take the sentence and make it plural, and you get rid of the gender-specific he or she. And no one notices. It doesn't stick out like he or she, or become stuffy like one, or become informal like they with a singular subject, or get outrageous like he/she, or he, you know, any of those sort of things. It just, you know, there it is. But it can drain force also. Turning, because the PowerPoint is individual. When we start dealing with groups or multiples, it can become less powerful. It may not. There are plenty of times when this just works beautifully. I gave an example of, well, when you read my book, which you certainly will do, you'll see an example of how the translators of a modern, very good biblical translation did exactly that. They went to plural and just ditched some really valuable meaning for the sake of gender neutrality. Sometimes I felt obliged to do it in my book. I went to it a few times today, and I can live with it. But I knew that he was actually the more powerful way to go. So it was with regret, but I did. There are other solutions available. Drop the pronoun altogether. The devotee has to be serious about his devotional practices. What can you do there? A devotee has to be serious about his devotional practices.
Plural, devotees.
Devotees.
Plural, just make it plural.
Yeah, devotees, but now we're talking about a different approach. You could say devotees have to be serious about their devotional practices. That works. But here, there's another approach you can take.
We can just delete the his.
Just delete it. A devotee has to be serious about devotional practices.
That's pretty perfect.
Out with the pronoun. You saved the word and saved the controversy. You could go with the devotee has to be serious about the devotional practices, assuming we know which ones they are. A sincere devotee should not be rejected for his or her unintentional fall down. What are you going to do?
Plural.
There.
Make it plural.
There, a sincere devotee should not be rejected for their unintentional fall down. The first one, can we agree, was awkward? His or her unintentional fall down?
Yes.
The grammar just like sticks out like a cliche sore thumb. And we've got there instead, which gives you mismatch between subject and verb. Not rejected for an unintentional fall down. Easy. Easy to do. These are the nice ones, you know, when you can avoid gender bias or gender specificity. Just an easy, clean, unobtrusive way. No skin, as they say, off anyone's back. For those who are wondering, one more examples of cliches.
Maharaj,
Yes.
when you said there doesn't fit so well, is it because they're saying a devotee as a more of a singular? I don't really get that.
If you say a sincere devotee should not be rejected for their unintentional fall down,
Because that's what plural, so there is plural. Did you say it didn't fit so well because a devotee and there, like singular, plural,
a sincere devotee is singular
and there is
and there is plural. So you have a mismatch. Now, again, I think that kind of they is becoming increasingly acceptable, but it still sort of sits in gray territory, especially in very formal writing, but anywhere, not everywhere, but in formal writing, it may seem a little, out of sorts, out of place. A sincere devotee should not be rejected for their unintentional. Now you can do sincere devotees should not be rejected for their unintentional fall down. Now you've got perfect match, you've got gender neutrality, but there's an example of where I would say you missed a little force. Because there's something about the individual case. A person with a fall down. Now you've got a class of people with a fall down. Sincere devotees as a group should not be. Whereas you want really a person. And if you take the make it plural way, you're going to drain force from what you want to say. Does that sound right?
It seems to me it's more powerful when it's singular, because then you can think about yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yourself or someone you know, or someone that you would picture in your mind.
It's more
A
correct.
sincere devotee should not be rejected for an unintentional fall down. You can sympathize with that
This
person.
is the best.
And
This is the best.
But when it becomes sincere devotees, now you're talking about policy. Now you're talking about policy. We've left the realm of individuals with specific troubles,
Yeah.
and we've entered into a policy discussion.
It's more abstract.
It's more abstract. So that's why going from singular to plural is not always a fully satisfying or even partially satisfying solution. But "and" here works perfectly.
And
You can sometimes get rid of gender-specific pronouns by switching to the second person,
You.
or the first. In good association, one will quickly advance in his spiritual practices. What do you do there? Yeah, you can say one will quickly advance in one's spiritual practices, gender neutral, but a little stuffy, isn't it?
Good association, you.
In good association, one will quickly advance in one's spiritual practices. It's a little formal. What else can we do? You. In good association, you will quickly advance in your spiritual practices.
it's better.
It's more direct,
Hmm?
It is the best. Best. The last one is the best.
Best, you like that. In good association, you will quickly advance in your spiritual practices. But maybe that's a little presumptuous and condescending. What else could we do? We. In good association, we will quickly advance in our spiritual practices.
I think that's way better. Because then it's not, accusing other people. It's just you, not me. I'm not.
Yeah.
Holding them down.
You might seem a little hotsy-totsy if you say you. Not to say that you can't sometimes say you.
Yeah.
You may find that the best thing for you will be to practice Kundalini Yoga, whatever it is. It's fine as a solution. Not as against he or she may find that the best solution is for him or her to practice Kundalini Yoga. You say, you may find that the best solution may work fine, but if we're talking about spiritual practices, and in this case, in this sense, we might want to go with first person, we. But for the question at hand, it's enough to know that either we or you would work to get rid of gender neutrality, of gender specificity, without making the sentence seem awkward or strange.
Because that's a general statement that fits to everyone.
Yeah, you or we.
Yeah.
If one is serious about Krishna consciousness, one should seriously attend to his spiritual practices.
If we are serious.
Again, right?
If we are serious.
Again, you might seem a little, although sometimes, if you're serious about your, but if we want to be inclusive, we include ourselves, that is. If we're serious about Krishna consciousness, we should seriously attend to our spirit. Either way, we'll get rid of the dreaded he.
Yeah. Because there is the you movement. Because I did hear, people have said that they've been to a lecture, for example, where the person speaking is just saying you, and then they say, oh, I'm just being you.
Yeah. So it's another consideration. It's out of the realm of gender neutrality, but elsewhere in our writing and editing, if we're always talking about you, we may seem condescending, or we may not. In the first months of pregnancy, you may feel. We don't have to say we may feel.
Right. Depends on the right.
Especially, if you're a man, you definitely don't want to say
right.
we may feel.
Don't be generous.
But even a woman writing for women, in the first months of pregnancy, you may feel. That's probably better than saying we may feel.
Right.
Yeah.
How many times am I pregnant? And for the first 3 months. So you is not bad. It's not just we got rid of he. Now we got to get rid of you. Assume there'll be no one left. But there are contexts in which we will go down a lot more smoothly than a seemingly presumptuous you. You had a question, Manji? Okay. Last. Another option is to recast a clause or sentence entirely. when an editor sees no better alternative, he may recast the sentence. What can you do there? You can do a he or she. One is not available. Oh, I've seen it. People trying to be gender neutral. When an editor sees no better alternative, one may recast the sentence.
Upon discovering no better alternative, an editor can recast the sentence.
Yeah. Seeing no better alternative, the editor may recast the sentence. The pronoun disappeared, no one missed it, you're gender neutral, nothing, there was no suffering involved. It's even shorter.
Yeah.
So that's another option. Just recast the sentence entirely so that the problem goes away. Any other questions about the gender neutral? Those of us who didn't grow up with it really don't like it. Some of us who didn't grow up with it really don't like it. Some of us have embraced it as we embraced it. Anyway, but it's with us, so there you are. Okay. Let's see where we are. Okay, returning to question?
So you are not advised to use this plural
Excuse me?
they. You are not advised to do this, use their.
Not
instead of-
advised to use the
because
plural with a
we
singular?
Yeah, we should not do this.
You can.
No, we can, but what your personal
My advice is
position?
that in informal contexts especially, it's gaining ground and acceptability, and you can do it.
But in writings,
As in, for example, I want every boy and girl to clean their desks before they leave.
yes.
You can do it. And I suspect, come back in a few years and you know, we'll compare notes. I suspect that it's going to gain more.
The new Chicago will come out and everybody will do it.
Yeah, even Chicago, I haven't looked at Chicago on this point, but it's being acknowledged increasingly as an acceptable way to go. Now, the other way that you can really solve this problem, and it's marvelous, switch to Spanish or Italian or French or Russian, you know, or Hindi, where gender is so built into the language that it's going to be another year before they get it out.
Right.
So if you really don't like what's going on with English, just switch to one of these gendered languages and everything will just be fine.
But in our writings, we should follow the grammar strictly, even in writings.
It's up to you. Some writers will say, I'm not going to use a they there. The subject is singular.
Yes.
And for them, that's fine. It's an available choice. They may say, I'm just uncomfortable with that, and I think my readers are going to be uncomfortable, or at least some of them are going to notice.
Right.
And so I'm not going to do it. Then say, okay, I'll find another solution.
So the choice of editor can
Editors can do what they like.
indicate
That's
is as
the glory of
a
being an
mistake.
editor.
Indicate the editor can indicate as a mistake or as some wrong usage of.
Well, if you're dealing with an author, you may, for example, say, Prabhu, what do you think about X? It's not that the only thing you can do is leave things alone or switch them. And that's a point worth making, that one of the things that as an editor you can do is query the author.
Yes.
Assuming the author's still around. Query the author about a given point. And what do you think about this? Do you care that it's gendered? Would you be comfortable with X, or would you agree to Y? Or can we knock out this paragraph? Or whatever other question you might have. Can we make this clearer? It's not that the only thing the editor can do is decide every question. There's a lot of back and forth that can go on between editor and author. As an example of how an editor, by a careful choice of words, can improve text, the title to Stephen Hawking's book was originally A Short History of Time. And his editor suggested brief. Just the difference in the word improves the title noticeably. A short history of time is fine, and it preserves the sort of paradox, but a brief history of time snaps. Okay. We're going to go to, again, mechanics, something quite mechanical. We've heard something more political for a while here. That's punctuation. It matters, of course. I could tell you the story of how I first learned about periods from my grade school English teacher. It was quite a good story, but I have something more entertaining, so I'll give you that. Let's see. Quite clever, this one, in fact. Dear Jack, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours? Jill. Same text, repunctuated. Dear Jack, I want a man who knows what love is. All about you are generous, kind, thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me. For other men, I yearn. For you, I have no feelings whatsoever. When we're apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours?
That's brilliant.
Punctuation is not to be done just by feel. One guy said it's 2/3 rules, 1/3 personal choice. It's not anarchy. There are two schools of thought about punctuation. One is called the rhetorical school, the other the structural. The first sort of deals more toward the feely side, and the structuralists want to deal more with the actual grammar of the sentence. Since we're 2/3 rules, I'm going to argue for the structuralist side, which has largely won the argument. You can see the argument made well in a book called Cleverly, because it's about punctuation. Cleverly, for those who are British, mind the stop.
Mind the stop.
Oh, mind everything.
Mind the stop. Punctuation marks in Britain are called stops. Periods and commas and so on. It's full stop, half stop. So mind the stop. Clever because usually it's mind the step. So you want to know the rules, you want to know how your sentence is working grammatically and punctuate accordingly. And then you have some freedom also to punctuate for emphasis, for force, and so on. But if you don't know the rules, you're going to be in touchy-feely land where I don't want to meet you. Okay. This is indeed from that book. The best punctuation is that of which the reader is least conscious. For when punctuation, or the lack of it, obtrudes itself, sticks out, it is usually because it offends. So keep your punctuation spare, but not too spare. We've already discussed using short sentences. Use periods. They take no more room than commas and less room than witches. You can have long, drawn-out clauses. Periods work well. A rule of thumb, only a rule of thumb, is one idea to a sentence. But not the flag is red, it is white, it is also blue.
No. The flag sentence.
A rule of thumb. Serial commas. Yes. Serial commas are those commas that punctuate a series, as in Krishna, Balaram, and Subhadra, Rice, Dal, and Chapatis, Vibhishan, Manu, or Krishna, Brahma, Vyasadeva, Madhvacharya. You've got these commas, and the one in question is the last one before the final conjunction, before the and, before the or. And the question is, keep it or leave it out. And the answer is, be consistent.
Why is there that dilemma? I've always kept it, and I've learned how to keep it.
Because there's two ways to do it. Both acceptable.
It's interesting. In Portuguese, you absolutely do not keep
Excuse
it.
me?
In Portuguese,
In Portuguese, you absolutely do not keep it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Portuguese, Russian, and so on, no need to report. We're just stick with English here. But in English, oh, thank you, it's always good to know, in case I ever have to punctuate Portuguese. But yes. But you have a choice. There's two. This is called the serial comma. Sometimes it's called the apostrophe comma. And you can keep it or you can leave it. Haigreva Prabhu preferred leaving it out. So the first edition, in fact all the editions of Bhagavad Gita, as it is, leave it out. And in fact, in Srimad Bhagavatam, most of Prabhupada's books, maybe almost all of Prabhupada's books, we leave it out. Because Haigreva preferred leaving it out. In my book, I left it in. I find that you get some extra clarity by including it, especially in some particular circumstances in which even the leave it out people might put it in to avoid confusion.
Right. Just for clarity.
But I just routinely, a sort of a observation is that book publishers tend to keep it in, magazines tend more to dropping it. The New Yorker famously insists on it. New Yorker magazine.
Yeah.
So again, it's open, choose. I lean toward leaving it in, but if you lean toward leaving it out, that's fine. Just you want to watch out for places where the lack of a comma might leave you confused about what's going on. I don't have an example written down right away, but there. Oh, maybe I do. Let's see.
The BBT style guide, is that, what is
The
it?
BBT style guide opts for leaving it in.
And, okay. Chicago leaves it. Yeah.
Chicago, I think, also goes for leaving it in. But Chicago certainly observes that you can go either way.
Consistency.
Beware of falsely, oh, this is important. Beware of falsely interpreting adjectives in a list to be equal and parallel qualifiers of the same noun. The venerable old Bengali saintly person, a battered old canvas fishing hat. No commas needed.
No.
They're not, what would you say, they accumulate. The venerable old, you wouldn't say the venerable old Bengali saintly person. You said venerable old Bengali saintly person, so that's how we should function. A battered old canvas fishing hat. You don't have to do battered old canvas fishing hat. I think there might be more about that in PBT style guide, but certainly there are other style guides. A red brick Georgian house, you wouldn't say red brick Georgian. An unbreakable, time-honored tradition, the ghastly old demonic witch, the pretty little white champa clubs, the pretty little white champa clubs, no. Just let them go. Enjoying the mild autumn sunlight, no commas needed.